photo here. We're done with this one. We can go ahead and close it. And by the way, you have Bridge, which we originally went to get the photos, but you also have a panel called Mini Bridge. In Mini Bridge, you can navigate to the same folder you were just in and grab the images right in Photoshop without having to leave Photoshop. So let's go ahead and double click on this one. And we can put Mini Bridge away. And now I need to make this image larger. You have a magnifying tool. Let's go ahead and just zoom in on it so I can work on it better. And on this particular image, I want to talk about layers and the two types of layers we're going to work with as a beginner. Now layers, if you think of layers, think of them as your original images on the bottom, and you're putting clear pieces of acetate on top. And whatever you do on the acetate, of course, is not affecting, you're protecting what's underneath. So that's the way these layers work in Photoshop. So if I add a new layer by clicking the new layer icon, layer number 1, and it would be layer number 2 after that, whatever layer selected, that's the layer I'm working on, and therefore it is not affecting anything underneath that layer. So for example, if I were to just grab the paintbrush and start painting with red paint and ruining the photo, oh no, you've painted over him. Well, technically you've painted on that layer. If you turn that layer off or hide it, you see that he is unaffected by that because you're working on that clear piece of acetate, which is called a layer, and not affecting the background underneath. So that also means if you grabbed a tool like the eraser and you started erasing on that layer, notice I'm not erasing the photo, I'm just erasing what I did on that layer because that layer is just that layer. So the red only exists there. And I can throw that layer away if I don't want it anymore. You get right back to the background. Now, the next kind of layer we're going to talk about is we're going to make an adjustment, and we're going to use an adjustment layer. So you can make adjustments to your photo that are destructive, meaning that they're permanent. So for example, if I want to lighten this photo up, I can go to my image menu, I can come down to adjust, I can go to exposure, and I can lighten the photo by dragging an exposure slider. And that gives me what I want. I wanted his face to be a little bit lighter, but it's also blowing out everything else. And if I click OK and close and save this photo, I've now made that change permanent. So we're going to do two things. We're going to work with a new kind of layer called an adjustment layer. And we have the same kinds of adjustments here. So there's exposure. When I click exposure under adjustments, I'm adding it now as a layer, but I'm also adding it with a mask. Now, if I make that same adjustment, make his face brighter, but I don't want everything else to be brighter, then what I can do is mask that effect above this layer. Now, I can start painting on that mask to hide, let's grab the paintbrush, to hide that effect just by painting in black. But that will take too long. So let's undo it and let's do the opposite. Let's hide the effect and use the mask to hide the whole thing and only paint in the areas we want to bring back. So we're on the mask. We have it selected with a little box around it. And now we'll just go to our image menu and we'll come down to Image Adjust Invert or Command I, Control I on Windows. So now that hides the entire effect on the entire layer. And notice that hiding is black, showing is white. So when it's all black, that means you've hidden the entire effect. So now if we switch to white paint, just by clicking the little double arrow here, and if it's not on black and white, you hit the letter D to go back to your default colors, or just click here to go back to your default colors. And now that we're on white, when we paint just on his face, we are now bringing in that effect. And by the way, we can use a brush and we can use a nice soft brush to soften the effect. There we go. We're now bringing that effect in only in the area where we want it. But more importantly, because that is a layer, it has opacity. That means we can turn it down. It's a little too bright. Or we can leave it at 100% and just adjust the layer itself. Make it darker, make it brighter. So we can do it either way, but we punched a hole in the mask, so therefore that effect is only showing through that hole that we just made. and now we can adjust accordingly. So that's making a photo lighter or darker using exposure, which was number 4. Number 5 was selective adjustments, making an adjustment in a photo selectively by using a mask on a layer. All right, so now let's go ahead and we'll close Donnie here. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove an object from a photo.